This Saturday, March 12th at 7:30 at the Centennial Concert Hall, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra will be presenting a concert that will feature the music of Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov. The orchestra will be joined by renowned violinist Vadim Gluzman in a performance of Tchaikovsky's breathtaking violin concerto, as well as Rimsky-Korsakov's exotic and very lush work, Scheherazade. Rimsky-Korsakov was a master of orchestration, and his score for Scheherazade is one of the most colorful orchestral scores in the literature. For most of us, myself included, hearing this work is a real feast for the ears. But imagine if when you heard the music, you also saw very clear colors that consist of all the possible hues and shades possible. It would be absolutely incredible. People who have this capability have what's known as synesthesia. Now, if we take this a step further and had an artist create paintings based on the colors that a synesthete saw while listening to music, what would that look like? Well, this Saturday, we are going to find out using Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade as inspiration. Joining me here over Zoom, I am joined by pianists Anna Schwartz and Shirley Elias. Anna is a synesthete and a student of Shirley. Aside from being a great pianist, Shirley Elias is also a wonderful artist and has created a whole series of paintings called Spectrum, the color of music, precision, and impression. Hi, Anna and Shirley. It's nice to see you here over Zoom.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. Anna, I'm going to start the conversation off with you. You have synesthesia. I'm fascinated by this. What's it like for you when you listen to music? Can you go into it a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So synesthesia, it's this crazy neurological thing that happens where, like two senses come together in the brain and sort of happen at the same time. So for some people, they can experience taste and sight at the same time. So like they bite into something and they see colors as soon as they sort of get the flavor. For me, it's sound and color. So whenever I hear a piece of music or something like that, then I see all of these colors as they happen inside my mind. And synesthesia is a spectrum too. So you can have some people for whom it's so intense that they actually get like a film of color over their eyes when they listen to music or have some kind of sensation. I actually knew of someone who had problems getting their driver's license because they couldn't listen to music and drive at the same time.
Wow.
Mine is not that intense. So yeah, on the other end of the spectrum, you have people like me, for whom it's more of like this sensation that you have just inside your brain. So whenever I hear music or something like that, then I sort of like see these colors playing out inside my mind as the music goes along.
It's amazing. Shirley, I also know that this is something you are super interested in. Composers had this, right? Can you go in a little bit about this and what composers had synesthesia?
Well, so I started with Messiaen, who's probably one of the well-known synesthetes, and I actually did a large installation painting. It was same as one for each movement. It was only 11 feet long instead of the 17 feet we got for this one. But same, he had so many writings about very specific colors, burnt oranges, Prussian blues, and there was imagery as well, but he spoke so specifically about the colors. And so that was my first stepping stone into this world, and that was a couple of years ago. And wasn't until Anna came into my studio and I knew that she was a synesthete. And actually, when we first met, she came to a master class, and we were doing a piano literature seminar class the day she came to the campus, and it was on Messiaen. So I asked her if she would speak to the class about what that world is like for a musician, and because she's a composer and a pianist as well. So that was and we've kind of been dreaming about synesthesia since then, or a project based on art and synesthesia since then. But we were kind of excited halfway through our research process to find out that Rimsky-Korsakov was a synesthete. So we found it was interesting to compare his color palette. Every synesthete has their own color palette. So we compared the colors that we could find for him next to Anna's. They're all so unique. And for him, E was blue. And this music is so much about the water, the waves, the sea, and so
Right.
it's probably not a coincidence that he wrote it in E. For Anna, that color is, or E is yellow, but interesting enough, she has a lot of textures with each one of her colors, and waves was a very consistent theme that came throughout this.
It's crazy. Anna, can we talk a little bit about the paintings? And Anna, I want to start with you. Can you talk a little bit how you dealt with Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade? Like, you heard it, and I was talking to Shirley earlier, and she was saying how you actually sat with the score and sort of outlined colors. Can you talk about how you did that?
Yeah. Oh boy, it was quite a process. The thing that was hardest for me was that I've never had to try and communicate this world that's inside my mind to other people. And I don't know if other synesthetes have this problem too, but it's so abstract and so sort of like in my own brain for me that it was such a challenge to figure out a way of communicating it to someone else. So, but we did. So what we ended up doing is I had the score of Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. So I had like all of the notes, the lines of music that all the instruments were playing. And we also had a great big color palette from Benjamin Moore. We had like all of these, like those color fans that you get when you're like finding new like paint for like your bedroom or something, and you have like all of these strips of colors. So I had a ton of those, and each one of those colors had like a little 6-number code on it. So it would be like 20346 or something like that. And so I would take all of those codes for each color and I would put that into the score in the spot where I was seeing that color. And then Shirley took those color codes and translated them back into the colors that they were. And then that's how she created the stripes. And the really nice thing about doing it that way was within the score, because each instrument is on a completely separate line within that score, I was able to take those colors and say, okay, this line specifically is the violin is creating this color. And then over here, it's like the flute is creating like this little bit of blue or something over here. So yeah, it was such a great way to communicate what's happening in my brain to someone else.
Yeah, and the results are incredible. Shirley, so you've got Anna's choices for colors as she's looking and listening to the score of Scheherazade. What's next? What did you do with the information that Anna gave you?
Well, I probably emailed her back about 100 times with a lot of questions. But then basically I took I mathematically calculated the size of the canvas first. There's one canvas for each movement, and then I took and built those to the size of the 42 minutes of music. And then within each canvas, then I started right from the beginning that they flow from left to right, just as the music starts to 42 minutes. And each stripe was mathematically calculated to the amount of time that Anna experiences each color. So then we also had another big column where she would put these textures in of jagged or prickly or bark-like or waves, small waves, swirling, misty, airy, dusty. There was like a whole language that I kind of had to create a consistent language with gel mediums, which you can see better on the live canvases. That reflect this. So I'm going to say that what you see on these stripes, it's kind of like a score. So if you look at the musician's score on the canvas or on their music stands, it's black and white. There's little notes, there's little lines, there's lovely little measured bars, but it reads like a book from left to right. Very uncolored. And then when they all play together, it turns into this magical, glorious experience that seems like light years away from that score. And what the audience is going to be seeing with these stripes, it's an artistic score of Anna's language. It's a very base language. They're very concrete colors. They, in nice, neat little lines. Like the music, though, her experience isn't in those nice, neat little lines. It all blends together. When musicians play, they don't play a note and then play the next note and then play the next note. It all kind of soars together. And same with her experience until we can get invent a machine where we can actually see inside somebody's brain. This is just kind of a very beginning glimpse of the language that that her brain is using in response to the music, because there is a color associated with each tonality. So as I said, each synesthete has their own tonal palette. And so that's the starting point. And the more instruments there are, the more this experience gets augmented. So when we were dreaming about a project, it was at the top of our list to have an orchestra, because if it was just solo piano, then there'd be a limited, it's one timbre, it's one instrument, even though it does have a wide dynamic scope and quite a wide octave range. Right. But that's all magnified with the orchestra, with the reediness of the oboe and the sensuous strings and the legato and the percussion and the brass section. So that whole range just augmented the color palette to the extreme that there are 269 specific Benjamin Moore six number coded colors on those canvases.
Yeah, and for our listeners, just to put this in some perspective, the 4 paintings that are going to be shown, yes, there's 269 colors, but am I right? 537 stripes make up the canvases. Yeah, so yeah. It's a massive project and really, really effective.
Yeah, just to go back to your question about the process, just drawing those lines on there. It was interesting because I did the first one and I missed one in the 100 plus that were on the first canvas, and because I got to the end and going, oh, I'm out 4 millimeters, and so the musician in me goes, you got to fix that because you got to play every note perfectly, and the artist in me is like, who's going to know 4 millimeters, right? Right. But I erased the whole thing, even though that took hours to draw all those lines, and then I went to the score, and you know how there's rehearsal letters, that's the way orchestras rehearse. There's letter A, letter B, letter C, so everybody knows where to start in the middle of a piece. And so I actually figured out the time calculations for those rehearsal numbers and put a piece of tape on the bottom and the top of the canvas with letter A, letter B, letter C. And then I had a smaller section to work with, and then I could just figure it within smaller sections. So it was I was kind of interesting that analogy worked visually.
Okay, so there are 14 paintings that came out of this project. They're all going to be shown at the Piano Nobile this Saturday night. But there are going to be 4 paintings that are going to be shown, am I right, behind the orchestra as the orchestra plays Scheherazade. Shirley, can you talk about that a little bit?
So we're just in the process of figuring that out, but there will be insets from each one of these paintings, and they will go in real time as the music goes by. They won't be like one color at a time. It'll be in blocks of 1 to 3 minutes sort of thing. But what you see in those 1 minute is what the orchestra is actually playing right then.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be fascinating. Shirley, can you talk a little bit about so there's going to be the 4 that's going to be showed while the orchestra's playing. Can you talk a little bit about the other 10 paintings that you've done based on Anna's color choices?
There's the other, so there was precision and impression was part of the title that you talked about at the beginning. The precision are Anna's paintings. Those are the specific stripes. And then the impression paintings is my impressions based on the palette of each movement. Now, understandably, each one of those palettes is quite big, but interestingly enough, there were differences between my go-to palettes and what her palettes were. So there were colors that I wanted to sneak in, but weren't part of her process. And so what each one of those paintings, I kind of am trying to give a bigger voice to something else of her experience. So the first one, I'm trying to give a bigger experience to her, to the textures. So I use my Carpe Diem for people who know my series, the circle series, which is based on sound, but I try to use the big circles of the bark-like and the pastoral greens and the big palette knives in the colors that they appear in that movement. So I used one of my designs with her color and texture language. Then the second one is very cubist because the movement is very angular or very rhythmic. And tons of lines in the second one. It was like a lot of work for both of us for that. that movement. And I can't imagine Anna, because like it's literally changing every 3 to 5 seconds on average. But that means for that movement, there was lots that were 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 1 second. There were lines I had that were just a felt pen line down because it was 1 millimeter. They were so tiny. But so a lot of work for her to stop on 1 second, find that color, find the next 2 seconds, and you have to do this over 12 minutes. That's a lot of work. So anyway, so I used I used a cubist approach for that one, where there's horizontal lines, vertical lines, diagonal lines, and in the middle, so there's this grid, but in the middle part of the grid, they start swirling together, and that's a reference to Rimsky-Korsakov described this piece as a kaleidoscope of fairy tale images. So it's kind of where everything starts getting twisted in the piece. And there are 7 instruments. There's a lot of soloists in that movement, and there's 7 instruments that I used abstractly or in a cubist manner, and I only use the colors that they play in for each one of those. They're a little bit buried, but they're all there, and I'll let people find them on their own. The third movement is, as I said, and this is a much more transparent and seamless experience. So it's it's not as linear, it's much more fluid, and it started out very soft, which was the way Anna really liked it. And when I spoke in the documentary, I talked about how I just want to keep adding more paint, and I did. Full confession, I did keep adding more paint. It's still very fluid, but it's not quite as soft as it was originally. But and there is still a big wave. That's kind of one of the themes going throughout the music. And then the last one, I used the brainwave image. When you look at brainwaves images, that's looping up and down on a page, and so I kind of used that. And there's a blue line that threads through Anna's colors, and so I kind of use that to delineate those waves, and that's the big shipwreck in the music.
Yeah, right.
And so it's quite chaotic. It's the only time that Anna sees black for a split second, but black again is a go-to for me that I use a lot. So the green light was there for me to now use black. And then the very end, when Scheherazade falls asleep and there's a happy ending, that's the only time she experiences very soft pastel greens, grays, yellows, pinky purples. Is so soft. And so that just looks so out of character for the rest of the piece, which has been this big dynamic soundscape for 40 minutes. And then also there's this peaceful ending.
Right, right. And I'm going to wrap the conversation up this way. What's this experience been like for you? Like, have you thought about your synesthesia this much, with this much intensity, and how much work has it been for you? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I absolutely have not thought about my synesthesia this much until this project. Yeah, I remember the very first time I experienced synesthesia. I was about 6 years old, and I was in a classroom, like a grade 1 classroom at school. And I remember being very upset because all of the numbers that our teacher had up on the wall were, to me, the wrong colors. So one was supposed to be blue, but it was like red or something. And at the time, like, you don't think anything of it. You're 6. You don't think that, oh, maybe some of the children don't think that these numbers are all the wrong colors. Maybe that's just a me problem. So yeah, I definitely haven't thought about it to this capacity at all until we did this project. But it's been so interesting for me to dive into this component of my own music making as a young musician and as a music student, to be really diving so deep into this aspect of creating music and making ties between music and then to the art and then like to the science side of it too. I love science. I think it's so cool. So yeah, just like bringing all of these components together into one big project is something that I'm just so grateful that we've had the opportunity to do.
Shirley and Anna, this has just been so fascinating and interesting. I could talk about this forever. I'm just always fascinated with what the human brain is capable of. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
For our Classic 107 listeners, if you want to check out these wonderful paintings Shirley and Anna have created, the concert is this Saturday night at 7:30 at the Centennial Concert Hall. You can hear the phenomenal music of Rimsky-Korsakov in conjunction with these amazingly colorful paintings. And as I was saying earlier, all of the paintings inspired by Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade can be seen in the Piano Nobile. Shirley and Anna, thanks again. This has just been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.